Today is Monday, April the 25th, 2013. This is the start of an interview with Mr. Robert Brewster at the RSVP offices of Catholic Services in Macomb, located at 26238 Ryan Road, Warren, Michigan.
On Wednesday.
What did I say?
On Thursday.
It's Thursday.
Excuse me. Thank you. Thursday, not Monday. Mr. Brewster is 85.
85 and a half.
Date of birth is September 28, 1927.
Correct.
Mr. Brewster resides at 3470 Middle Belt, Orchard Lake.
Right.
My name is Dave Brousseau, and I will be the interviewer, and Gary Miglio will be the videographer. Mr. Brewster, would you state for the record the branch of service in which you served?
I was in the 82nd Airborne. I took my basic training in Fort McClellan, Alabama.
This was in the Air Force?
82nd Airborne.
Airborne. That still was part of the Army, right?
The 82nd Airborne was part of the Army.
Yeah.
When I went to Fort Bragg, took our basic training. Then I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. What am I saying?
Let me take you back a few minutes before that.
Yeah.
You were born here in Detroit?
No, I was born in Painesville, Ohio,
Okay.
in 1927.
How did you get to Detroit?
I was in the fastener business, and I came up here as a sales manager for the whole country for Standard Press Steel.
You moved around quite a bit, so let's start with your back in Ohio. How big was your family?
The Brewster family, my family, was 4 people, and the Brewsters went back to being in the Mayflower, and I had my dad had 4 brothers and 4 sisters, and when he found out that we were in the Mayflower, they traced us back to Love Brewster, who was the son of William Brewster. And the Brewsters came over on the Mayflower in 1620. And the Browns family that was tied into the Brewsters came over at the same time, in 1620, to Massachusetts.
Did you have any brothers and sisters?
I had an older brother and 2 younger brothers, and I lost one brother. He passed away when he was less than a year old.
So you went to school also in,
Ohio?
yeah,
Yeah, I went to high school in Ohio, and then when I got out of the 82nd Airborne, I went to Ohio State, graduated from Ohio State in '51. I became a golf pro and went to Dayton.
let me go back a minute here. You got out of high school. Were you drafted at that point?
Yeah.
Or why did you get drafted? Is that just the way it was?
That's just the way it was.
Did you try any way to get out of it, or?
No, actually, I signed up to be in the Air Force, but then they weren't taking anybody. So I had 2 years in the 82nd Airborne.
When you were drafted, how old were you, right out of high school?
Yeah, right out of high school,
So this would have been right after World War II,
1946.
1946. What was going on then? This is just after the war.
Well, going on after the war, they were bringing soldiers back in that neck of the woods and we were getting our industrial base going again.
What were your thoughts about being drafted? Were you scared? Were you,
I don't know.
I don't care?
No, you're looking forward to it,
Yeah?
because when my uncle, who was in World War I, helped start the National Rifle Association. And on the nursery, I was in the nursery business, we had a couple hundred acres. And shooting became a natural way, because with a natural rifle, once a week he'd have people come by the dozens and 2 dozens to learn how to shoot. And learn how to shoot an M1 rifle, and they'd learn how to shoot. And as a kid growing up on a nursery, you did a lot of hunting and trapping and all that sort of thing. So it was encouraging to go into the service. Plus, if you went into the service, they gave you 4 years of college. So afterwards, you got part of
Was that the GI Bill?
the GI Bill.
Great, great. I know a lot of kids that would not have otherwise been able to go, so it was encouraging for them to join up too.
Sure. And I
Were
can't-
you an athlete while you were in high school?
Yep, I played football, basketball, baseball, and track. And
Did you ever consider going to school right then with a scholarship or?
yeah, I had a scholarship to go over to Albion College. But I got, my brother was still at Ohio State, so I decided to go to Ohio State. And I graduated from Ohio State and went into the golf business. I was a golf pro in Dayton and a golf pro in Cleveland. Arnold Palmer was one of our members at that time. My background in high school. I got on our Hall of Fame at Perry because I played everything. And
Team most valuable in football, basketball, and track. All-star teams in football as a fullback.
I weighed 175, and at that time everybody was little,
Yeah,
so you played whatever you felt like playing.
yeah. Now that I think about it, I think the heaviest lineman we had was about 170 pounds. Where did you go when you enlisted? Where was your boot?
Fort McClellan, Alabama.
What'd you think about that place?
Yeah, it was good.
What time of year?
I went there right after I got out of school in May.
Boy, it must have been pretty hot down there, eh?
Yeah. Nice town though.
What did you think about that experience?
Yeah, it was good. There were a ton of young guys that had gone to school with and everything else, and it was a good time to learn how to be in the service. I ended up playing on their baseball team,
Oh, yeah.
and made it kind of nice.
Seems your athletic background got you into a lot of things that you probably wouldn't otherwise have.
Well, when I was at Fort McClellan, they had a choice of going over to Japan right then, but my brother was getting married that summer, so I went to Fort Bragg and got in the 82nd Airborne. And then for the 82nd Airborne, we went down to do our jump training down here. Whoops.
What made you decide to go into the airborne?
I was gonna go into the Air Force, and when I couldn't do that, I thought it might be fun to make my first 13 trips up on an airplane, I jumped out. It was kind of exciting. You didn't enjoy that, wouldn't you? The big thing when you jumped out, you had to say something funny,
Oh, okay.
so everybody would, and I made a couple of them with General Gavin and General Westmoreland. And afterwards, they'd say, "Are you the one that screamed all that?"
I went to school with a couple of young lads that got into the airborne, and even back then, I was curious, what on earth would make somebody want to go up in an airplane to heaven and then jump out and hope you survive? And particularly in peacetime, it just struck me as kind of, what would they want to do that for?
Oh, you'd love it.
I'm sure, but I mean, at that point in my life, it was taking care of Dave, and I wasn't looking to go out and find ways to see if I could destroy me.
See, the biggest thing about, I remember, I was on the football team, and this is General Gavin, and he'd gotten divorced, and one of our guys had the best shoes, and he went over to be his orderly, and the famous German actress was in there. Oh, what was her name? Anyhow, so that was what we talked about for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Was it Rita Hayworth?
Rita Hayworth. And then Westmoreland, when I was on the football team, you want to see this?
Yeah, why don't you just hold it up so he can get it on the camera?
Westmoreland was, he went on and he had all the headaches in South Vietnam, but he was my battalion commander, and if I ever missed a pass or anything, as he came back from the next inspection, he'd say, "Hey, why'd you miss that pass?" Or something.
Westmoreland would be on your left,
Was he general then?
Lieutenant
No,
Colonel.
Lieutenant Colonel. He was a great guy. I mean, he had been in the tank division, and a lot of them had gone into the airborne because that was the ones that, there was 101st that was down in Kentucky, and the 82nd was at Fort Bragg. And if you ever want to see a great camp, you ought to, if you ever go down that way, you ought to see it. And when I got out, I was in,
Pretty mean looking.
Yeah,
who's that?
I believe that's you.
But here's, afterwards I got out and I was in the PGA, and that's when I played on a tour. And I got that from Smith, who was a pro at Detroit Golf Club. And he talked me into coming up there and being a member when I came up here as a manufacturer and represented things. This is when I was young, I showed you that. Yeah.
Hold that up so he can get.
The only proud thing I did, my mother was happy about, I went all the way through the Army and never had a drink or never smoked.
How did your mother feel about your getting drafted?
Oh, in those days, everybody was getting drafted. That's my wife, she passed away. She was a teacher. When we came up here, she taught in Pontiac. Here's some other pictures of.
Yeah, he'll just hold them up.
Now, after you were in the airborne, how long were you a part of that group?
Of the 82nd?
Yeah,
Not, when I left, no. I really didn't stay involved. I went back down to Fort Bragg. I'd go to Pinehurst and play golf. Here's when I was a golf pro.
Well, they assigned you to the airborne. How did you get out of that?
Well, I had 18, when I finished, you know, I signed up for 2 years.
Mhm.
And when the 2 years was up,
Oh, so you stayed in with that?
yeah,
But all of your exposure was here in the US at
Yeah.
one of the bases.
yeah, there wasn't any war going on at the moment. And I didn't sign up as to, you know, to be, what do you call it? Either leave or you sign up to be in
Reserves?
the reserve. If I had signed up, I'd have gone over to South Korea, which I'm glad I didn't,
Yeah.
because I was busy.
In the big scheme of things, this 2-year stint in the service, what did that do for you, or what did that take away from your career?
Well, I think it was a good thing. I got 4 years of college they paid for
Now, this was after you finished your 2 years.
after I finished my 2 years. And the 2 years, you had a chance to find out what the military was all about. I made 13 jumps out of airplanes when we went down to Fort Benning for training, and we spent a few
Mhm.
time there. That's where all the officers were.
Tell me about your jumps, particularly the first one. What was that like?
Well, the first ones, we did jumps at Fort Benning, where we jumped out of just a plane there, you know, so we could learn how to handle the chute. And the first jump that we made down at Benning was funny because everybody wanted to say something funny so they could laugh hard when we got done.
How far up were you when you jumped?
The jump was about 1,200 feet.
That's a pretty small jump.
Well, they didn't want you to get shot
Yeah.
too much. And so the big thing is you jump.
What was your
Yeah.
highest jump?
Probably not much more than that. I don't know. It might have been a little bit higher than
Yeah.
that. But they wanted you to be low so that you had all your weapons with you and everything, so
Yeah.
that you were ready to shoot when you got down. In fact, you practiced taking the rifle out on the way down.
So you'd have to pull that rip pretty quick after you
Yeah.
jumped for
You
1,200.
had your M1 rifle with you. And you didn't pull anything.
It was connected
It
to
was
the
connected. You just-
interior.
Yeah, you just got in line and jumped
Yeah.
out. And it was a lot of fun, really. The whole football team jumped together, and I jumped with Gavin and Westmoreland at one time, so, you know, that was fun. You had to keep your mouth a little quieter when you had the generals around,
Yeah.
but it was a lot of fun. Yeah. And Fort Bragg and Fort Benning were good camps. And I ended up playing football, basketball, and baseball.
Were these teams that were formed on the base?
Yep, formed on the base. Usually, when you played everybody, you know, the other teams.
The other
It was a lot of
teams.
fun. And I had a scholarship to come up at the Albion and play football. And I ended up playing freshman football at Ohio State, played a little basketball, ran a little track, and ended up getting a scholarship or getting my Ohio thing in golf.
What made you switch to golf? I mean, what was?
Well, I got beat up a little bit playing football,
No doubt.
and I had a fraternity brother that was a golfer and a brother that got real interested in golf. And I suddenly fell in love with golf. Ended up, after I got out of school, they got me a scholarship, or they got me a job at Dayton Country Club. And I went to Dayton Country Club and loved it, loved teaching. Had to stay away from the pretty girls.
How long?
Was I a golfer?
When did you get into the tour?
Well, I got on the tour went on tour in 1954, and then I got married. After a couple more years of golf, I decided to get into being in sales, and I came up to Detroit in 1959, and the fastener business was Standard Press Steel.
What convinced you to get out of the tour? Was it just not as exciting anymore as it was, or?
I couldn't make any money, and I got tired of driving.
Okay.
You
Okay.
drive from Florida
Yeah.
over to Texas.
Tour's a lot different now, but
It was a lot of tough work, but I enjoyed it.
yeah,
And Arnold Palmer was a member at my course in Wickliffe, Ohio, Pine Ridge. And then I was a member of his place for about 15 years because we had a plant down in his neck of the woods. So I still see Arnold and Don Shula, you know, the coach.
yeah,
He grew up, his dad used to work on our nursery.
no kidding.
Yeah, and so Don and I grew up together.
Do you see him anymore?
I still talk to him a lot. He had a place up here, you know, he had a
In Troy?
in Troy. But yeah, I fixed him up with one of my girlfriends when we were kids.
Well, he spent some time with the Lions too.
Oh yeah, when he came up here, my wife and I came up here in 1959, and Don came up here in 1960, and his wife was from Fairport, Ohio, and was a school teacher. And she was a good, close friend of ours, so we spent a lot of time together while he was here.
Mm-hmm.
He was here, 2 years? Then he went to Baltimore and took over the job as the head coach. Remember that?
Yeah, I do. He didn't stay there that long, but he really got his
Well, remember
notoriety when he went
remember
to
why-
Miami.
Remember why
Yeah,
they got beat by New York Jets? Remember that?
yeah.
And by the guy that wore, what was the name of the great player from Pittsburgh that went on in the great things from the Jets? He was a quarterback.
Joe
Talking
Namath.
about Joe?
Yeah, Joe Namath.
Joe Namath.
Yeah.
Broadway Joe.
Broadway Joe.
Yeah.
That was cool. I still talk to Shula. His wife died,
Mm-hmm.
and his wife was a school teacher in Painesville. And he married a gal that was from Arkansas that divorced her husband who had a ton of money.
Oh,
So they're having a good time down there. But getting back to the military, I would still love to see the NRA get strong so that every kid learns how to use a weapon. And they use it for military reasons, not for shooting people. What do you think of that?
well, there's a lot of thoughts about the NRA and what their goals are and how they fit into what's going on today.
Here's my jump thing.
Yeah, you gave me that one.
All right.
Were there ever any people after that first jump that said, yeah, no, this is not for me, I'm not going back down again?
No, most of them, I think they evaluated whether they were the people that would like that. And I don't think we had too many that way. Big thing we had as a group, we'd all say something funny and then we'd all laugh about it. They were a good bunch of guys.
You went through a lot of practice, though,
Oh,
going through those kind of things, that if
well, that's what we did.
there were anybody that was fearful, they'd get the hell out of it then.
We went down to Benning and you did a heck of a lot of jumps
Right,
out of a fake plane.
elevated platform, jumping without much of a parachute onto some soft,
You know, it's all automatic. You just grabbed your little parachute in case the big one didn't open or something.
Yeah.
And You just jumped out, and then you tried to say something funny. That was a lot of fun, really. Yeah. And
If you had to do it again, would you do it again?
Oh, yeah, I jumped with Gavin and those guys, and they were good guys too, you know,
Oh, they've been around for a while though.
especially, you know, because Gavin, he wrote quite a book. I ought to bring it and let you read it about the Battle of the Bulge.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were, you know, the tough people in war were the people that were actually in the war. I wasn't in the war, so I didn't really know how tough it was when people were shooting at you.
Is Gavin still alive?
Best of my knowledge, he got divorced, and
You should
think-
introduce us to him so we can interview him.
yeah, the one that died was Westmoreland.
Yeah.
He was from down in North or South Carolina, and that was a shame. He was a good man.
How many men would be doing the jump at one time?
Well, you know, in those days there were two planes. There was a C-46 and 47, and then when my last jump was one they called the C 82nd. They kind of named it after the 82nd, and it seemed like it would be like 30 or 40 for a plane, but I'm not positive. That's one thing I never read. But as they got the bigger planes, they had bigger jumps. At the same time, we had a division of the 82nd that wasn't the jumpers that would come in on the planes that were towed, what do you call it?
The gliders?
Yeah, the gliders. And that, you know, and they had to learn how to jump too, because if the glider broke up or something, but the big thing is you learn how to use your rifle, and you were ready to, when you got down, you were ready to shoot.
And you're in full gear. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you're gonna hit the ground with a jolt
Yeah.
because you're carrying a lot of gear with you. And anybody get hurt when they
Yeah, we had, yeah.
leg breaking and
That's funny, I hurt, my last jump was a pay jump. I hurt my darn knee on a football tackling dummy where they had sawdust and there was a 2x4 under there. And all the way down I had to remember which leg was. That was a good jump though. I'm glad you reminded me of it.
how did they retrieve all of these? They send the trucks out to go round them up?
Yeah, when you got down, you got your chute, and you gathered everything together so it could be repacked. And you met, these were on those kind of jumps. You had your rifle with you, and usually you went into a simulation of a battle, and you left your gear there, and then somebody would come and pick it all up.
Was there anything going on in the international arena at that time that presented a threat?
No, actually, South Korea didn't come on until about
Early 50s?
Yeah, early 50s. So there wasn't really anything going on.
There must have been activity going on before that, though.
I remember Westmoreland came in one time, and one of my jumpers, a guy named Bartlett, was an old-timer World War II guy. And he says, Bartlett, what do you think of our last jump and program? He says, well, it shouldn't be a real big problem. Nobody's shooting at us.
Yeah.
We all laughed a little bit. But nobody was shooting at us. So fortunately, on all the jumps I made, nobody was down there taking a whack at you. But when you look at what the 82nd went through over in Germany, there was a lot of shot up kids.
Yeah. And those kids were coming down in middle of cities and jungles and a lot of obstructions you had to learn how to avoid.
Yeah, and really a general, he was tied into it because he had been tied into a couple of the Battle of the Bulges, and so he was a good man. And Westmoreland was in the tank business before, and he was tied in to the same war.
Now, he went on to take over right underneath Eisenhower, didn't he?
Well,
Westmoreland?
Westmoreland, Eisenhower was, became president,
Yeah,
and Westmoreland stayed on, became a general, and unfortunately, he inherited South Vietnam.
uh,
And it was a horrible way to get, they ended up,
right,
because we lost so many people in South Vietnam.
yeah.
So it was a big difference.
A lot of really big names in that time period of,
This is me when I was a golf pro. See how young I was?
do you stay in touch with any of your friends you made while you were in the service?
Yeah. Yeah, one of the guys from Chicago, Smith, and another one from out in LA, but then you got busy when you went to college. And
Yeah,
doing stuff,
it's awful hard.
yeah. And I married my wife who was in college. And
Is that where you met her?
Yeah, I was dating her roommate. Is that right?
How did you get involved in this business proposition you spoke of earlier?
Well, one of the people who was in college with down at Ohio State, his father owned Cleveland Cap Screw, was in the boat business. And when we got out of college, he talked me into going out with him. He got a new car, went out to California to LA, and I decided I was going to come back and get in the golf business. And he talked me into getting out of the golf business and getting into being a sales manager with his company.
Amazing how these events in your life lead you in different directions, and they're somewhat connected and somewhat not connected, but
Well,
you
fortunately,
need to make decisions, and
being in the golf business, I met a heck of a lot of people that were in manufacturing business.
mhm,
And when I came to Detroit as a sales manager for that area, I joined Detroit Golf Club, which is, you know where that is, down at 6 Mile.
yeah,
And half the people there were in the manufacturing business,
yeah,
and spent a lot of time entertaining
yeah.
buyers for Ford, General Motors,
Kind of the
Chrysler,
who's who.
who's who. And then I got to be national sales manager and decided to stay here and fly around the country because we did a lot of business with Caterpillar and John Deere, people like that, and all the way out to California. But I am very sad that in 1975, during Carter's administration, I spent 2 weeks with the steel industry trying to convince them to put a duty on stuff coming out of Asia. And now, if you go around this country and try to find a steel mill that's still alive,
Yeah,
or find a fastener company that's still alive, everything's coming out of Asia. You couldn't fight the next war if you wanted to. You'd have to buy everything from Asia. Pretty sad.
yeah,
When I came to this town, I did a study and found that there was a couple hundred tool and die companies that I could be tied into to sell, as well as the big three. And if you go into Detroit now and see how many empty buildings there are, it's embarrassing.
yeah, there are,
It's a lot of jobs for
Mhm.
kids.
Mm-hmm.
And when kids get out of school now, if we don't have the industrial base, how do we have the knowledge to go from there if it's all coming out of China? What I really like to see the next war is to see us bring back our industrial base as quick as possible. Don't you, what business were you in?
I was in banking, I was in finance, I was in education, I was in,
Would you, then you'd know
yeah.
very strongly of how many places are closed down and kids don't have jobs.
It's an era that kind of just went away
Yeah,
and got replaced. And it's been changing rapidly since then.
unfortunately.
And we haven't found a way to supplement what we lost in transferring all that detail out.
Well, somehow you gotta put a duty on stuff coming out of other parts of the world, even South America right now is starting to import a lot of things here, you know? We gotta get jobs for kids. Kids get out of school, they gotta have a job, right?
I know, yeah.
When you got finished, were your folks still alive
Yeah, fortunately.
with your service
Yeah,
commitment?
my dad died in '76 and my mom died in '82.
I'm sure they were glad to see you back home, but then you were off digging areas for new life again, so I suppose it was just a short time when you got finished that you were off.
Well, we still own part of a nursery.
Uh-huh.
We still own part of a farm out in Kansas. And I really enjoyed growing up in the nursery business. That was interesting. But
That's another business that's fading away.
it's hanging in there. But you see more, if you go to Costco's, you see more nursery stuff than you. So it's a different world. The people that own our farm and people that own our nursery are big in their corporations and so forth. And again, it used to be in this country that 45% of all people in this country either worked in manufacturing or farming or something
Yeah.
like that, or connected to it. And right now, I've got real good friends from John Deere, and they know how many tractors are being made in Asia
Yeah.
in their competition. I think the biggest battle I see now is getting our industrial base back so kids will have jobs. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes,
Because what are kids gonna do when they
Right.
get out of school?
yeah. When you were training for the jumps, did you jump in all different kinds of weather? Did you practice night jumps?
Yeah, we did.
You did?
Yeah, down at Fort Benning, we got to brag most of the time.
Uh-huh.
Just say,
So sometimes, did you jump like when it was rainy out, or?
yeah. It wasn't that bad. They tried to pick not a real windy day.
Yeah, yeah, I imagine if it was windy, that would be a real problem.
Yeah. You ever been down to North Carolina?
I have. Yeah,
Where-
just the very, Greensboro and that area. I haven't been in other parts of it.
You want to know another crazy thing about my family?
Yeah.
My mother family came over from Scotland.
Uh-huh.
They were Veezies. And one of her relatives was in Kirtland, Ohio, when the Mormons came,
Uh-huh.
and they helped build the church,
Oh, really?
which was in 1835 or
Mhm.
something like that, or 30-something around. And my brother still has the original paper, and the Mormons have been trying their darndest to get it because of the history of it. That was way back,
Yeah, pretty
And-
early.
and then they drove him and Joseph Smith out of there, remember that?
Yes. Yeah. He started in New York, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he was here in Michigan?
Well, and then he ended up down on the Mississippi River in Illinois,
Uh-huh.
and they killed him down there. The farmers did. They didn't like the moldable wife thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you aware of the war years? Were those years vivid in your memory, or?
I can remember shooting baskets in 1941 when somebody came out and said, hey, they bombed Pearl Harbor. And it was a big shock to everybody.
Did you know where Pearl was?
I just, well, yeah, you could, they had movies on Hawaii and so forth, but I didn't know that much about it. But I had one of the guys that worked on our nursery lied about his age and went into the Navy, and he was killed during that, and I'll never forget that. When they bombed I forget that one battleship.
Arizona?
Yeah, he was killed. His name was Childs, and I'll never forget that. And of course, that was the start of the war. And I had a lot of friends that went into that, and during that war, because I was too young to go into service, but when I was 14 or 15, I lied about my age and worked on a railroad because they didn't have enough people to work on the railroad in 43, when the war was going on.
Wow. Yeah, that time in the world, particularly in the United States, must have been interesting because an awful lot of shifts occurred because the men were taken into the service and a host of jobs needed to be filled, and
Well, thank gosh, industry jumped to it. We had industry.
Yeah.
The Ford Motor Company started building the airplanes. And in Cleveland, where I was, there was half the world got involved in doing things for the service. Because
That's right.
we obviously had a heck of a time figuring out how to beat the Nazis.
industrial base bumped up just,
And of course, you all hated the Japs for what they'd done. And we sent people over to China in 1936, the Flying Tigers and everybody
Yeah.
else, trying to fight them off. And thank God Roosevelt, got us in the war. So, my brother went into the Navy Air Force, but he went in right at the end of the war. And fortunately, I went in 46, which is, the war was over.
mhm.
There wasn't anybody to shoot at.
Well, the war carried on, not the war much, but the shifting of our troops out in the east and the west were still there
Yeah,
for several years afterwards.
especially in Germany
Yeah,
and in Japan.
and in Japan.
The big thing that everybody can remember is when they dropped the atomic bomb. That was a
Yeah.
happy day, because I had a lot of friends in the service that, that were hurting. So that was a good time.
It's strange. Again, I go back and remember 1941. I can picture that day. I'll never forget it. And I heard my dad running around the house. I just can't believe I have never seen him like that. But when I heard, I don't recall the bombing as vividly, anywhere near as vividly as I do the Pearl.
Yeah.
I know it happened, but I don't know what the heck I was doing, but
Yeah, I remember that day because I was shooting.
1945, I wasn't even 10 years old yet, so.
Well,
But,
you
but
mean
a
that-
lot of the influence of the war came to us through Selfridge. Because the city in Selfridge was very close. And everything that happened kind of went through Salvage and then back into Mount Clemens,
Yeah.
because they were so closely related.
Well, as a kid, you remembered all the things that the Japs were doing to China way back in the 38, 39.
No,
And then, of course, when
It was
in
around-
41, when they dropped the bomb
mhm,
in Pearl Harbor, why, it was a real shocker.
yeah,
And again, I lost this one good friend of mine, Bill Childs. And it, you know, it was just, you know, we were taken by surprise,
yeah.
unfortunately. And thank
Well,
God we
certainly-
dropped the bomb on them and got it over with, you know.
Well, I think Roosevelt was trying to stay out of that war, and this event is something that just made it easy to get back in.
They pulled us in, they wanted us in
Yeah.
that war. The Japs did. And so did the Germans.
Are there any other pictures you would like to share with us that we can put on the overhead?
Well, you know, these were just my military things.
This was infantry school,
Yeah.
which was included under the basic parachute training course.
Well, that was that in Fort Bragg or Fort Benning?
Fort Benning,
Yeah.
Fort Benning.
Have you ever been there? That's a beautiful fort.
No,
That's where they do a lot of training, because everybody that comes out of the Army, what's the college? They all go to Benning to train afterwards, you know, for more infantry and stuff like that.
West Point?
West Point.
when you got discharged, did you have a program called 5220?
I forget.
Well, you wouldn't forget this.
Where they paid you?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, I never heard of that. And what, a couple of years ago, a year ago?
Yeah, about a year ago, yeah.
This guy tells me about this 5220. I had never heard of that before. And everybody since, I've tried to remember to ask them, and most of them remember it. And I talked to another guy we're gonna talk to next month.
For 52 weeks.
And I had to coax him into remembering, and then he said he remembered. Oh, yeah, he says, boy, that was quite a lifeline. He said, when you get out, it's
Yeah.
like the Vietnam and Afghanistan, these people are being discharged and have no job, don't have nothing. And at least it gave the kids
Oh, yeah, you got, right
20
away,
bucks a week for,
you went to college and everything was paid for and you got a paycheck.
well, not everybody went to college, unfortunately. That was kind of silly. They should have, but they didn't. Gave them a chance to hang around for a while, and
But they were eligible to, they could have,
you're right.
yeah, they could have.
Even buy a house, some of
Yeah,
them. But all the years, I never knew anything about that.
Yeah, it was a good program. And and again, if I'd have signed up to be in the reserves, I'd have gone to South Korea. And a lot of kids got shot up in South Korea, you know. That came in before South Viet, you know, for the next war. And
The
Vietnam.
next police action.
Oh, that was money and guns, and that was a terrible thing, really. But I'm glad my dad's brother, Wade, started the American Rifle Club,
Mhm.
because I still think that's important for kids to learn how to use weapons. And at the same time, they teach them not to use them wrong, you know. The kids that are shooting people up in downtown Detroit. Because you probably went hunting when you were a kid, didn't you? Some, you know, so at least you know how to use a weapon.
Anybody else have any other questions? Yeah,
One question. What was your favorite utterance out of the airplane?
We used to have a contest to see who could be the funniest thing. And I had one guy that, Smith, who was from Chicago. And we both had a girlfriend and we'd shout her name. Isn't that allowed to do that? The only good thing about being in the Army was going to church, because there was always some nice looking ladies there.
Who like men in uniforms?
Yeah, like,
Yeah, there you go.
or we'd have a dance, and they were. It's funny how you could still remember a lot of that. They could talk to you more than you could talk to them. People in the South were talkers. Did you ever go down into Alabama or North Carolina?
Never been down to Alabama, no.
The great thing about North Carolina is that you're on sand, and in the winter it was warm compared to being in Detroit or Cleveland. I grew up outside of Cleveland. Perry, Ohio. Do you ever go east of Cleveland?
yeah,
You know where Paynesville is?
yes.
That's where Don Shue lived. His mom had a grocery store there. Yeah, we still have a nursery there.
It's still working, huh?
Well, we leased it to a big outfit now. It's on the west side. So nobody's in the nursery business anymore, but it's still there. My dad, father started it in 1870 or something like that, so you might as well hang on to it. Of course, the Brewsters didn't get over here until 1620. So we've been here a long time. Time flies.
Yeah, especially when you're having fun.
Yeah. I'm
Well,
glad you
Thank
guys
you very much.
got me in there, because I want to get a hold of some of my old buddies and see how they're doing. Do you want a copy of any of this stuff?
Some of the pictures, sure, if you have them. You have copies of the pictures. Yeah, that's a good one.
You didn't talk to us about your activities with the Military Tank Command.
The what?
Military Tank Command. As a crewman?
Boy,
No.
what is that? I vote for. Well, I never was in a tank. We were, in the 82nd, we were infantry. And we didn't have any tanks. The only thing, Westmoreland was a tank guy,
Yeah,
but the tanks were up in, the tank gang was up in Kentucky. Fort Bragg didn't have any tanks. And we were strictly military, infantry. Jumping out of airplanes.
Robert, thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us.
Well, it was good to have some good memories.
Thanks for the interview, Bob.
Thank you very
Thank you very
much.
much.
And thank you very much for your service.